I'm Arindam. I'm a true blood market researcher. I love marketing, and as a result of all my experience, therefore, in GSK and Unilever and HUL for about 22 plus years, I've now founded BrandEigen Insights Analytics, which is a data-enabled consulting firm.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravee, conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the branding, marketing, and the business world. Hi, Arindam. So nice to have you on my
Hi.
show. Every marketeer wants research to go hand in hand, and then so much disruption is happening in the marketing space. So it'll be nice to know, any new ideas that you witnessed there that you think are pushing the boundaries of research, insights, and analytics.
Yeah, so I would roughly talk about three, and I would go back to my experience with MRSI about like for the last 3 years as well. So one of the greatest thing which I hear, recently is like how we are using the ecosystem of new startups, what they are doing to different industry, including the retail industry, how to use the ecosystems of these startups to actually use research. For example, there are now companies, technology, and let's say the ecosystem which they are building for retail inventory measurement. Yeah, retail inventory measurement, especially for the indirect retailers, especially in suburban markets of India. And we can use these kind of ecosystems to actually measure, let's say, sales and stock and market shares, rather than using our traditional pen and paper stock calculation method. Yeah. So using more and more of the ecosystems which are being built today in the modern India should be the platforms for measurement going forward.
Very interesting.
So that's what I say is contextual research. I'm also quite amazed at how voice is now being used for research, but it is not for the sake of just using voice, but like we know that there are a lot of conversations which happen at retail points, and they are very interesting with respect to let's say sales throughput measurements. And if you can isolate a retailer's voice with a proper identification, instant measurement of sales in different kinds of retail points, which are probably traditionally not covered by the traditional market research, can be actually very good for measurement going forward. So you are not resting on claims anymore. You are actually getting real-time data through the human voice identified by the technology and useful for measurements. And I'm quoting this example, but this can be, something which can actually go across different kinds of research as well, especially with the kind of improvements of the entire voice enabled systems which is going on. So that would be prompt for market research to really take it on and use it in the manner which is like extremely local for the different regions of India. Yeah.
Wow.
So that voice.
Yeah.
The third thing which is there is like, we know how Amazon, Google, WhatsApp are like nowadays, that is our home, right? That's where we spend our times.
Yeah.
And in research also, we cannot be having another ecosystem of our own. We have to embrace ecosystems in which consumers are in. And therefore, using these ecosystems, making Amazon, Google, WhatsApp as our partners to go forward into doing our consumer understanding is very, very critical. Otherwise, we might be measuring consumers, understanding consumers in a very isolated system, which is not reflective of today's reality in India or across the world. So these are the three things. So contextual research, voice-enabled measurement, and using Amazon, Google, WhatsApp ecosystems for our research would be the three things which have struck me the most.
Amazing, amazing. I think this can really, really change how research is looked at, in terms of what it can achieve for a marketer, especially in the agile marketing times.
Yes.
Arindam, any particular features of Google, Amazon? I'm talking about the third idea that you mentioned, that you feel are really powerful and easy to use as well, like you said, for small businesses.
Yeah. No, I think, see, Amazon has its Amazon bestsellers analysis. Yeah. So that is like research happening at real time. So on the go, 24/7, that's available. That's the gold mine in terms of finding out, like, what are the trends or what are the things which are, going on. So for any new entrant who's trying to come to India, for example, and trying to figure out, what are the things which are actually disrupting the market. So from pure real-time measurements of popularity, ratings, reviews, taking that as the stimuli, taking all the conversations back to consumers, and you can actually find out easily, not without any other primary research, but we can find out these kind of stuff. So that is one way of using Google, Amazon, WhatsApp. But then there is, like, you can use these ecosystems live to do your research. Yeah. So you can actually have people, like in Amazon, in Google, at their, real place at their homes. And you can be actually tracking all of that through consents to actually figure out what's really catching their eye. Yeah. When we say all decisions of consumers are irrational, what is the extent of irrationality which is going on? And even without any claims and all that, you can actually figure this out. Yeah. So therefore, using Google, Amazon real time, using features of Google, Amazon's, let's say the so-called bestsellers analysis, or even this entire free-flowing conversation which all of us are having in WhatsApp every day, and using a little bit of very, very research-centric NLP kind of natural language processing algorithms within that are some of the things which can really be done. If done, of course, in a very, very consumer-friendly manner, and not just, using it for the glamour part of it. Yeah. Absolutely. And we are fortunate that consumers are already there. Yeah. And our job is to just be in line with consumers, because we know consumers are far ahead than what marketers or even researchers think.
We were talking about technology and its role, and in your initial, intro, you also talked about stories, which is become another buzzword, and I think justifiably so, because as we are appreciating the role of technology, especially in the lockdown, we are having to celebrate our own humanity and creativity also in the isolating times. So the story, you mentioned critical incident technique. If you could tell us what is the right use case scenario for it, take an example, and what is the kind of data it can give, which is more granular than traditional research technique.
About like 10-15 years ago, there was this development done by stalwarts who were fortunately my bosses at Unilever and HUL, and even like stalwarts like you, and even in famous companies like Research International. We knew that we were hunting for stories, and we were establishing this new technique called critical incident technique, which later on came to be known as moments. Where expert people who can really talk the language of consumers can actually get to the point in the past to actually figure out what made a person shift from A to B. Yeah. And this shift is so critical for marketing tasks that without it, having generic consumer understanding was not helping us anymore, because we all wanted to be disruptive. And therefore, we all wanted to catch those stories of the past, but narrated in the manner which is like really contextual, which captures all the influence, which captures all the triggers, barriers, which captures all the stereotype, and we can understand what has been the journey, and therefore come to that critical incident was critical to make sure our communications, our activations, even our innovations, even the way we practice marketing is all based on that one story of that one consumer in the past, which made her shift from a completely, let's say, having home remedies to having something like a multivitamin supplement. Yeah. And that shift is a big shift in that particular life of that consumer and during that time. Now, it's very important to capture that story rather than today going and asking her about what would you want in a supplement, or what will you make you shift to a supplement, because those are probably claimed answers which can never really answer the real stuff. So therefore, this thing of whenever we are researching something which is for the future, it is very important to go back to the past, think of a similar situation, make sure you let's say you are talking to the consumer in as if like you are her mother, or you are her daughter almost, and making sure that that mother tells her story of the past, of that particular incident when she shifted. And generally what happens is that whatever reasons, functional reasons we know about some movement from let's say a homemade home remedy to a multivitamin supplement, uh, uh, actually the reason is completely different. The reason is something big which has happened in her life. The reason might be just like a show of status for the let's say the mother to her mother-in-law, or it might be redefining the relationship between the wife and the husband, or it might be the way the mother wants her son to look at her, recognize her, reward her. So those were the things which ultimately we got for every category, every brand which we were discovering, and we never saw those reflections happening in the communications, in the TV communications at that point of time. And therefore we thought stories, if done well in today's digital times, we can understand well. And digital times are basically like when consumers are really impulsive, they're always looking for influences, or they're always influenced. So getting the stories now is fantastic. It's probably more important than what happened in the past.
As you were talking about the technique, Arindam, I was really transported to a point in time, when I was actively involved in this. And Arindam, I can say that I realized the power of a conversation then. How powerful a conversation can be. Like it's almost an alchemy going on between two people, and they both come out a little changed.
Yes, true.
And what you said about the life enablers, like we look at so this in this whole times of behavioral science and context, and how much have human beings evolved in these thousands of years. Let's get really real. This technique actually shows you that those life and how human we are, across the geographies, and despite different cultural conditioning, that just the fact that a family has moved from a joint to a nuclear, there'll be a lot of changes, or there is a promotion in the family and there'll be changes. And oh god, this is so powerful. I'm rediscovering with you as you are, I'm kind of revisiting it. This is such a powerful thing. And like you said,
Right.
communication, if that starts capturing that depth of
Yes,
understanding, uh,
that's true.
uh, what an asset a brand can build.
Right.
What an
No,
asset.
very true.
So real data and coming from the consumers. And the best thing is you don't have to interpret. It just starts, coming out. And
Yes.
especially the emotional payoffs. They were
Right.
so human. They were so moving, like you
Yeah.
just said, like a mother wants the child to look at her differently,
Yes.
acknowledge me,
Yes.
and I
True.
am with the times, or things like that,
Yeah.
So this is so
No, I've
powerful.
seen this like if you take the most of today's brands, which are, let's say, all tech brands,
Mm,
or that kind of stuff. But whatever the tech brands, whatever they're doing and all that. But I
mm,
see the most human of the stories which are actually happening when they are embracing the technology. Yeah.
mm, mm,
If somebody is getting into, for example, edutech, yeah, if some
mm,
family, some mother son getting into edutech,
mm,
the critical incident is not about, like, what the tech can deliver, what the video can deliver, what the interactive way of learning can be, but
mm,
it is much more about, like, probably the mother's intention for the child is like, how can I push him forward to become the top ranking student in the class, yeah, and what would be the
mm.
contribution of me at home for that
Yeah.
particular thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Or even if it is about, like, the most modern experiential education,
Mm,
what is the actual thing going on in the mind of the consumer, of the mother or the father in this case,
mm,
to make sure that the child has a bright future tomorrow, yeah.
mm, mm.
And it is those emotional nuances which rule the entire choice, entire thing, even if product is, or a service is being sold at a certain premium, that
Mm,
entire premium might just come not because of the value adds. Of course they are important, but
mm,
it's always like, what is the status uplift which she and he
mm,
has in his or her mind,
mm.
just because of the service which they are supposed to, or like they're going to adopt.
Yeah.
And it is that, like, the status uplift is like equivalent to probably,
Mm.
1,000 rupees uplift in the price of the service,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it doesn't even, like sometimes marketing is criticized for being gimmicky or exploitative. But if we see that
Right.
this is also value, like in the
Yes.
value exchange, if you are making
Right.
me feel like higher in status, that is also some value I derived as a
Yes.
human being. So,
Mm.
why not?
And that is most important, actually. And
Mm,
that is most important. Whatever, in moment marketing we do, but if
mm,
we have to survive as a brand for the long term,
mm,
unless we build those relationships
mm,
from day one,
mm,
none of our businesses are actually going to, like typically break even in 3 years, and then grow profits in 5 years. So whether
mm,
it's
mm,
startup or it's established
mm.
MNCs, or whether it's like new brands, tech brands, or like the traditional brands,
Yeah.
we still have to really
Mm,
get back to that story and make that story as our hero,
mm.
because there's no way out of it, even in
Yeah,
market research,
yeah.
real-time research, whatever we talk about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Story is a, shortcut, a sense
Yes.
making device for the brain. So,
Yeah.
might as well use it. Otherwise, until unless,
Yeah.
yeah, actually. So
Yeah, and
now,
it's like also like just one say. So
yeah.
the point is that we continuously need to hear these stories, and
Mm,
it is only when you continuously hear stories you get patterns in stories. So it's like
mm,
not just one story, but like, because if you are serving a billion consumer kind of a brand, yeah,
yeah.
you need to hear a substantial amount of stories, and like while you hear stories and you are immersed in that world, you see the patterns unfurled, and then you actually build stereotypes, uh, or you see the stereotypes which are being broken or reinforced. And
Mm,
the other hand, we are therefore thinking of archetypes for the brand, or for like even from the for the community, or like even working through influencer strategies and all that. So it's very important to keep on hearing stories rather than, just doing like, qualitative research of 25 interviews and all that.
So, right, like now you've indicated how you need to hear many stories and keep listening to them rather than, it being looked at as just one anecdotal, rich and deep, definitely, but, is it applicable across? Will it connect across? So there has to be a technique that stories at scale, like you've called it, qual at quant. Can you tell us more about it? And, what is the best use case scenario for it? What it is not and what it is, this methodology.
Right. So we can hear 1 or 2, 5 stories, 20 stories through typical researches, but like, how can you scale it up? How can it be 24/7? Now, one of the good things which has happened is people now converse, almost like all the time through their, different platforms like WhatsApp and other such tools like, So the point is, though in research, people don't want to open up much, especially in a quantitative context, when it is a survey kind of stuff, and only you get close-ended answers, and that too, of course, like claimed and all that. But today's conversational mode of consumers, especially on WhatsApp and all that, enables now to get lots of open-ended stuff, which can be stories from these conversations. And if I can have 1,000 conversation over WhatsApp, with different kinds of people, and if I'm able to analyze that, I get actually the power of 1,000 stories within a day's, almost, But then, it is very difficult to analyze them one by one, because you just can't, there is no capacity of the human brain to do it, or the research brain to do it. But today, smart use of NLP, especially when we take all the learnings from the fintech world's use of NLP, I think that is one thing which we can therefore use in market research, because these NLP experts now, they can actually tell you what's topical about your conversation versus the rest of the world's any millions of conversations. So actually they can figure out, what is the topicality of your conversation, what is your story, in contrast to whatever stories is happening in the rest of the world. And therefore the importance of your story comes out just because today NLP algorithms can compare your conversation with the rest of the conversation.
Within the category.
Through different, exactly, within the category. And therefore, if herbal or is one functional element, or if it is about, let's say, redefining relationship between the in-law and the wife, if that is one, those kind of keywords, phrases are coming out in your story, and they are much higher in proportion compared to the normal conversations which is happening in the web or in the social climate, these algorithms can actually figure out, therefore, what is the topicality of your conversations, in a second, or whatever in the processing time they take, which might be in a few minutes. So therefore, out of 1,000 such conversations within a day, you can get such topicalities, which is there. Of course, the old worlds, or when I'm saying old world, in the recent this thing, they've always come out with negative sentiments, positive sentiments, those kind of stuffs are already there. So those are there, but the new thing is about how do you compare your conversation, get your topicality of the conversation, of your conversations of the category or the brand, especially when it is so different compared to the rest of the conversations. And once you get that, then establishing certain implicit way of measuring the parameters, the old world parameters of relevance, of differentiation, distinctiveness, even credibility, believability, even probably value for money and all that kind of stuff can be now done implicitly. So, the holy grail in particular in market research has been, okay, claims were also always there. And from those claims of scores, you calculated relevance. But then you, of course, you tried to normalize those, you tried to see it against database to see, what those scores meant. And often what was happening is these scores were becoming like, almost at generic, scores were always like seeming like the same thing. They're always in the same direction, same patterns and all that. Now, however, implicit measurements have been much more, taken by the research world in a much more credible way. So these conversations can tomorrow create scores of relevance or differentiation or credibility or even for value. And these come from these different topics of conversations or different stories of conversation. And therefore, it can be great for any kind of like innovation measurement or concept evaluation kind of stuff. When we measure concepts of different innovations which are going to come into the market, we establish the disruptive nature of that concept through implicit measurements of old world parameters through the conversations happening in the entire, the social climate. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I got is the fact that it is coming from the consumer in their language. I mean, how much of research happens just to get, what is the consumer language for it, without it coming from the stimulus of the brand communication. What is the consumer referring it to as? And you get that naturally, to shape your marketing eventually.
Yeah.
So this is like the best of both worlds for innovation concepts.
Yeah,
Quant and
it has challenges. It has challenges in terms of whether people are going to be interested in carrying on a conversation with you, especially if it's long. And we have to make sure that it's not long. It's very pithy. It's like it always has to embrace the language of today's conversation. So when we are having conversations with our people, with our respondents, we have to make sure that we are conversing in the modern way. Yeah. And therefore doing that. And also, like, we can't use NLP just like the way it is. New methods, new innovations are always there. Capturing the modern, the tonality of communications is also very important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You were talking about CIT, and I just remembered, would you briefly like to share the Saridon example, that you've done recently, and how that gave rich data for the brand?
So it goes across, not only, the brand which you mentioned, but like goes across other brands. But we know, the brand has launched its communications very recently. And we know that that it's especially in modern India, when there is so much of uncertainties and all that on one hand. On the other hand, people are kind of like much more narrowed down in their own digital world. And as a result, there is loneliness and all that. We managed to figure out that people's tensions and stress increase much more because, the worries and the tensions, they keep it to themselves. Yeah. And as a result of it, they bottle all their worries, tensions and all that. And this is coming across the milieu in different forms, whether it's the mother of the family, whether it's like the person who's recently taken up the family business, all these tensions, including like tensions of new work atmospheres. They're so unsure and so, let's say, feels like we should not be talking about all of this. And as a result of this, the tension brews up. And as a result, that becomes a huge modern thing of looking at stress and tension and how it can actually be pivotal towards communication building for, for these brands, because the brands therefore know their consumers in the most contemporary of the manner. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's the thing. So we found that out, and it was like we were not researching this facet, but it actually came out, because even if you are like just researching the, the after effects of a headache or something like that, we actually got this as the, the pivotal point, and therefore that was like a big learning for us. And it again came through stories, came through multi-level conversations conversations, conversations at scale. And therefore, I mean, that was our example into the modern way of looking at consumers.
At GSK, there was a case study that we were talking about earlier. Why this was such a new way of looking at it, and how research helped you take a stance that everybody was not in agreement. Would you like to share this, like build new brands, efficiencies of existing brands fall flat for expansions? This is really interesting. Would you like to take us through the case study?
Yeah, I mean, happy to do so. So we'll not get into the names of the brands and all that because they probably would remain confidential for a slightly longer time. But the point is that, any existing organization would love to, reap the harvest of their current brands to make any efforts into market expansion. Yeah. That's something which exists. You don't have to educate consumers about the brand, and therefore that's good. So when we were in this, let's say, organization, but we had the mandate to, take the business from X to, let's say, 3X, or X to 2X. We knew that, $1 billion is just not going to come, by the, existing efforts. So we need new efforts. And people recognize that. So that's great. But what they also would pose as a challenge is like, we need to build that $1 billion more, but like, we are better, we would better do it with the current brands, things, and they are established brands, they are well-known brands, they're consumer-loved brands, they have equity which can extend, so why not? Yeah, and that has been the thing. However, as marketeers and researchers, we always pose difficult questions for ourselves. Like, we think that if it was so easy, why hasn't it been done in the last 10 years or last 5 years? Yeah, because nothing would have stopped that, right? So the point is that once we got to know that, yes, there is a challenge which is there from the business to utilize our current assets and current brands, we therefore thought, even as a market research, researcher, how do we make sure that when we do this research, we should get these answers as well? That so when we do even foundation exploratory research, we need to go back to our boards and tell that, whether we can still use our current assets or we need, completely different assets. And who best to give that answer other than the consumer? Of course, if asked in the right way and in the right manner. So therefore, our entire effort was to make research smart. Every research smart. Every research, should have a link to the returns it brings in for the business. Yeah. So every research should be valued not for like, how much $100 you've spent, but whether you've given the business $1,000 profit. Yeah. Or $1,000 return is the way we should calculate ROI in research. So therefore, our effort was to make sure that while we understand, habits and behaviors, can we also understand, at the back of the same kind of studies, whether the ideas work with the current brand, or the ideas need a new leg or a new brand or a new asset. Yeah. And therefore, at the very beginning, we tried to answer to the board of this organization that whether the current brands can work, or we need new brands or new brand or a new mega brand. Right. From the feel of the market, we already knew that there is something disruptive going on in this country. Yeah. And consumers' choices are not limited anymore to the existing brands, but for any new thing, they are open now to experiment with new brands. And we were seeing this. And if you are looking at new spaces, now you cannot anymore ignore that consumer reality and still believe that traditional brands, once revived, will do an amazing job. No, it's not that. People are looking for new things. Dynamic India is looking for new things. That the choice set has like enormously expanded, almost like it's disrupted, right, with all the new channels and all that. So therefore, we built in within our traditional studies measurements of new brands and versus old brands. And the ongoing hypothesis was like traditional brands will bring in more credibility when we move into new spaces. Yeah. And that was our ongoing assumption. Yeah. So we believed in the traditional. We put that in our research, even in our measurements and all that. And we were seeing that whether the research proves it otherwise, whether the research breaks that hypothesis, whether research disrupts that myth. And because of the smart way we used to think of every research we invest in, we actually figured out that the new stuff, the new brands, were actually giving us much more, not only sometimes much more relevance or uniqueness, but also higher credibility. Yeah. So quantitatively, we could prove at a very, very early stage that why we need new brands, and the old theory of marketing efficiency with old brands as measured in, let's say, different kinds of marketing models or different kind of measurement models, why those things cannot be true when we move into new spaces, especially. There, in those cases, the past is not anymore good to predict the future. Yeah. And therefore, interventions at a real time into the market with bold experimentations of new versus old, and seeing whether the traditional hypothesis is broken or disrupted by the consumers is very, very important for us. And we saw that almost for 80% of the innovations we were experimenting with, we were seeing that 80% of those actually had significantly higher scores on believability or credibility with the new brand, because consumers, they have a lot of associations with current brands. And with the new space you want to go into, they don't really want to give that license to this old brand. Plus, the new reality of this consumer is he or she is experimentative. He or she wants to experiment. So just being attached always to the old brand might be a bit boring. Yeah. And therefore, experimenting with new benefits, new brands, new tonalities is actually good. So new spaces, therefore, requires new kinds of interventions. And this is very, very important to find out at the very onset, rather than leaving these things when the design perspective of the brand comes and all. So that has been the great story. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Arindam, this whole traditional brand equity stretch that we will find out,
Right.
is our brand going to stretch to another new category or not,
Right.
even if there's
Yeah.
synergies, and hence what does the consumer perceive? That kind of an understanding is not enough for finding out
No.
whether a new brand can do a better job.
Yes.
Is what you're
It
saying.
cannot. Yes, exactly. Why I'm saying this is because the contexts have changed. So it's not only your brand and your brand story. Think of the larger landscape. Yeah. The consumers have changed dramatically. So if you only see your research through your brand lens and through your new innovation lens, it's not going to be enough. Having a extremely good understanding, dynamic understanding, even like, at every day you need to challenge your own hypothesis today, of whatever you've learned in the past. আমি বৃষ্টি দেখেছি, বৃষ্টির ছবি এঁকেছি, আমি রোদে পুড়ে ঘুরে ঘুরে অনেক কেঁদেছি, আমার আকাশ কুসুম স্বপ্ন দেখার খেলা থামেনি, শুধু তুমি চলে যাবে আমি স্বপ্নেও ভাবিনি, আমি বৃষ্টি দেখেছি। বৃষ্টির ছবি এঁকেছি।
My signature rapid fire.
Oh, is it? Good,
Okay.
good.
Favorite personal possession?
My my Apple Watch.
Okay. Alternate profession could have been
Politics
lovely.
or political consulting.
Lovely. Okay. What would you do on Mars for fun?
I would probably look for creatures on Mars to interview.
Which animal will you be? Will you like to be if given a choice?
I mean, I will. I love jaguars. Always. And that has found different meanings in different parts of my life.
What I love about my son,
he can do extremely good animations, and I think I will use him for my own presentations, my own profession at zero cost.
wow.
So he'd be a great ROI employee for me.
In-house.
In-house.
A book you'd like to gift to all your friends?
The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's one of the best in terms of human stories and behavior change. I'm available at Arindam at brandeigen.com, so that's the ID which I have, inspired by the company name BrandEigen. I'm awed by the way you are, let's say, Jagged with Jasravee is actually bringing out all the relevant marketing content across the world. Yeah, sitting here, we can now kind of hear all the great marketeers, brand experts, philosophers, research experts, modeling experts from all your Jagged with Jasravee, and you are kind of inviting people who are at the edge, and therefore the entire conversations at the edge is just amazing. I think so much in-depth focus on the work which these guys are doing across the world for different kinds of businesses and brands, bringing that out, hats off to you. So I would really want your people, current people, your other people to really watch your stuff, but they should subscribe to your channel, Jagged with Jasravee.